An error occurred. Today on Sales Chatter, we were having a little problem there. Sorry, everybody. We were having a little problem there going live. Today on Sales Chatter, positioning chapter 2 and 3, the assault on the mind. Brother, I love that intro. I find it so groovy, man. So groovy.
There we go. The audio listeners are probably like, "What the hell? Like, what the like?" We should have like one of those radio voices, like, "Welcome to Sales Chatter with Dan Deigan and Ryan Mohamed."
Yeah.
Like it should be edited for that. But yeah, it's pretty cool, pretty snazzy, my man, pretty snazzy. It's Friday.
Snazzy one, brother. So Ryan, chapter 2, the assault on the mind of positioning, the battle for your mind. For all of you watching and listening, this is week 2 of our second book. And Ryan, if I could, I thought about something this morning, and I wanted to get your take on it. And it's kind of jumping a few weeks back. And the reason I say that is I realized this morning that so things are starting to ramp up in our lives, right? We're getting busier from both a bridger side as well as a logistics side, as well as a running a company side, as well as managing people side. Like there's a lot of things that our team, you, myself, and a couple of us are really finding. And while we were doing the Power of Now, the usual thing that happens, right? Because you're immersed in the book. You're always thinking about it. You're doing these things. We're reading the chapters every week. And it's been 2 weeks since we stopped that book. We did the recap. And then last week we started positioning, right? And I'll tell you, I realized this morning I need to set more triggers up because I'm actually stepping out of the now quite a bit. And I don't know, and I'd love to get your take on it as well. And I realized that this morning in the shower. Remember, I was telling you while we were doing the book, like every day I would feel that water hit the back of my neck and allow the goosebumps to come out, like no matter how hot the water was, just feeling every single drop hit your head. And I realized this morning, I can't remember when the last time I felt that was. So I went back into the now during my shower and just really paid attention to how the water felt on my body, how my feet felt on the shower floor, like how the soap felt going through my hair, and I hadn't done that in, I don't know if it's been like 4 days, 5 days, a week. Like I'm sitting here and I can't remember the last time, but I know I was doing it during the Power of Now.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you this. Has this ever happened? And when you find things like that, what are some of the things you do to re-engage in that process?
So to answer your question, since we've read the book, I haven't done that in terms of like kind of going to that autopilot. My drives, the first thing I had to do when we were reading the book, I had to identify areas where, I'm just in autopilot. It can't be like all the time, right? So for me, the first thing was driving, so now I'm like, wow, like I've really like been listening to podcasts instead of like music and radio and stuff like that, and kind of go into, because I don't know about you, Dan, but like if we listen to the radio, they really only play really the same 5 songs every half an hour anyway. So you get into that autopilot depending on your length of a drive, right?
Ryan, I'm laughing only because since the Power of Now, I stopped listening to music in my car and I only listen to audiobooks.
Yeah, it's one of the best things, and for me, it's
funny how we both made that flip. I had no idea you made the flip.
Yeah, I made the flip, and you know what? Shout out to Damon if he's watching this morning. It was because of him, because when I was in Vancouver for a couple of days earlier this month, he took me around and he just had audiobooks and podcasts playing, and I simply asked him, I was like, okay, we're talking here, he's showing me around the city and all that stuff, and he's like, and I was like, why aren't, like, you're listening to this, like, how come you're not like fully immersed? I always assume you have to be fully immersed. I guess for an audiobook you really do, but what he kind of said was like, I just let it play, and whatever is going to speak to me is going to speak to me. Like, I'm not like having like, okay, I need to chapter 1 whatever it is, or things like that. And I feel like that's where podcasts kind of really worked for me on that aspect. So for me, yeah, I just truly, and I don't really go for drives much often, to be honest. Like I'm most of a homebody. It's usually to the gym or go to the grocery or go to Toastmasters or do random things. So answering your question, everything for me, man. Like it's everything is in the now. Even this morning when I realized it too when I was putting my jacket on the hook, because like it was pretty cold. So I went to go put it. I was like, okay, I'm really immersed into the moment.
Mm.
And not that autopilot anymore. So yeah, that book has changed my life, man. I'm gonna dive into a new earth and see what kind of happens with it. But yeah, so to get back to get back to your question, no, not yet, because I feel like but with you though, you had that trigger, right? Because you had that trigger of that you're reading the book that you should be in the now. Right. And James Clear talks about that in Atomic Habits when you're building habits, because that's all we're really trying to do, just build a
Yep.
habit of being in the now. You do it environmental, right? So even if it's something as simple as like picking up your shampoo bottle or like your soap bottle or anything like that, right? And for me, my triggers too, like looking at this water bottle. Like if I look at this water bottle, I didn't want to see one that I could see the water level. I just want to see the thing and be like, okay, I need to drink water. I need to take a sip, and then you sip, 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 and then you're empty. Then you go like refill it upstairs, and
Mm.
but yeah.
Mm. Okay, well, I appreciate that, and I'll try and I'm going to amp that up a bit for myself, anyways, because I feel like I have to. So, to positioning the battle for your mind, how to be seen and heard in an overcrowded marketplace. Chapter 2, everyone. So, the first thing that hit me with chapter 2 is something Ryan and I have been communicating and talking about for a while now. In communication, more is less. And I started, it's funny you giggle, because I started giggling because in the background, so what some of you don't see is as we're building Bridger, as we're doing sequencing, as we're doing email notifications, we just finished the conversation of more is less. Like, how
Yeah.
do we do more with video? Less words, use less words to establish a point, use less words to create motivation, to amp up, to energize, to do. And then as I go, right, the first words of the second paragraph is, in communication, more is less. Our extravagant use of communication to help solve a host of business and social problems has so jammed our channels that only a tiny fraction of our messages actually get through, and not necessarily the most important ones either. And Ryan, I just started laughing. I'm like,
Yeah, I
holy,
started like
like, do you
you started
remember when
perfectly.
emails first came out? It was like if you got a book,
Nah.
that an email that was a book, it was like so happy. I was so happy to read it because I'm like, oh my God, we're actually communicating. Like, we're written communication. Then
Yeah.
text takes over. And then things like Twitter, where it's X amount, so you really got to get careful with the words and the characters you use. And now we're getting into an age where 3-word emails convert better than somebody saying, here's my specialty. This is like, it's crazy how this works. What about you?
Yeah, I like. Well, first and foremost, yeah, like I think that was such a great thing to read, and I chuckled quite a bit because like even you sent some stuff in the chat that I took a look at this morning. I'm like, less is more, man. This is too much, And I'm like, everything that we're kind of doing around us, right? Like you look at like your T-shirt right now, like Dan, like what if your T-shirt was about that you're wearing about Baby Yoda? Baby Yoda was born in so and so and all that stuff, right? It's just like this is whatever you get the point. You get the
This
point
is my
as I'm
good
wearing.
side, buddy.
Yeah, see, there
Yeah,
we go. So
yeah.
you get the point of what it trying to makes. And I, for me, I think the simplest and the most effective messaging out there, because I know the book gets into what's around us and the overload of everything that we have, but I'm able to look at a half-eaten apple and then associate that with Apple. I'm able to look at even like when we look at like groceries and stuff like that. You look at banana, you know what a banana does, right? You don't need to be explained what a banana does. And I think when we're
Mm.
bringing this back into like logistics sales and sales in general, have the framework there and understand your mission, because everyone's kind of I would say this though, I'm loving prospecting because I'm actively prospecting again in my logistics business, and I love it because the bar is so low right now. So I'm able to book meetings like with shippers and stuff like that pretty easy, just based off my messaging. And it's pretty simple. Keep it under 50 words, make sure it's at a fifth grade level or below reading level, and have a call to action. They don't care about your North America, they don't care about anything, but I'm going up against those people. I'm going up
Yep.
against those people. And guess what, brother? I'm freaking winning right now.
Yeah.
So I think with everything, Dan, less is more. Even for us, we've been waiting on our car for about I want to say about a year and a half now, because of like the shortages and all that stuff. And even still, like when we go and see all the features and all these things, there's like, can this car drive? Yes. Okay. We're good. Let's sign the paper, right? I don't need to get all like the heated seats and all those things are
Wow,
great
you
things to
need the
have.
heated seats in
No,
winter,
we do. We
brother.
do. No, we got the top. We always get the top of the line. Like we got the hybrid come in, but it's just like I'm not gonna buy a car because heads up display is there. I actually find that pretty annoying and distracting.
Yeah.
But it's just like for different people. I just love that what they said in this book, especially when it comes to, they get into like the information overload that we have. So, we're bombarded, companies out there. You've mentioned this too. And I remember watching the documentary on Netflix about how like messaging and all that stuff is meant for us. And, how they're always fighting for our time, the algorithm and things like that. And, it's a combination of, like you said, Dan, being in the now. So, yeah, this is a great chapter.
So one thing that there was two parts about this chapter, the assault on the mind, that really hit me because the media explosion that they talk about towards the end of the chapter and so much information coming at us, I've heard that all before. What I really thought was interesting was these 2 points. So he talks about, and so they're going into now, keeping it short, keeping it succinct, keeping it, and they say the Sunday edition of a large metropolitan newspaper like the New York Times weighs about 4.5 pounds and contains some 500,000 words. Okay. To read it all at an average speed of 300 words per minute would take almost 28 hours, right? Not only would your Sunday be shot, but also a good part of the rest of your week too. So how much are you getting through? And that's not I'm not asking that as a question. What I'm saying to everyone watching and listening is think about that for a second when you're writing your emails or when you're trying to communicate with somebody. Think of how you're reading emails. I'll tell you, when I get to the second paragraph, they don't get to the point, I disappear. And that's even DMs, LinkedIn messages, everything. And then the second part, sorry, Ryan. And then the second part of this that is truly powerful is when he says, consider this, the Lord's Prayer, 56 words. Okay. One of the most powerful documents ever. The Gettysburg Address, another massively powerful, 266 words. The 10 Commandments, 297 words. The Declaration of Independence, 300 words. And then he says, just for good sake, he says, and a recent U.S. government order setting the price of cabbage, 26,911 words. So, right, think of that. The Gettysburg Address, the Lord's Prayer, the 10 Commandments, all short. Like, I didn't realize the Lord's Prayer is only 56 words. And think of that. How many people find salvation in the Lord's Prayer? How many people say it every day? How many people is that the framework for their life? 56 words. That to me showed the massive power of the right words in the right format.
Yeah. And it feels like it's just the opposite of what we're trained to, especially when it comes to school, right? So anybody who goes through the post-secondary education, when you're in university, I had a friend who had to do a 20,000 word essay for his master's, and he just got back his marks. So we're always kind of told, like, when we're writing essays and we're doing those framework for the essays, oh man, like I feel like we've gone to, I don't know what the educational system is like now, but when I was in school, it was more of, okay, you got to hit the marks, you got your criteria and you've got to hit like the 500 words. They don't really care about the messaging too much. Obviously, it's got to flow properly, right? But that's when you start adding filler words, right? Or like the additional stuff just to get that like 500 or just to get to the word count, essentially. So when we are trained like that throughout our whole lives, because we're in school longer than that's basically our whole lives at that point when we're at a different stage. And when we come out here and we're like, okay, if I can do that, if I got to write an essay, let's put that into an email or let's put that into there. And like I've always said, I've always kind of preached, if the way I consume emails, the way I consume content is on my phone. So if it's a video that is like 5 seconds or 10 seconds and it hasn't hooked me yet, I'm just gonna scroll to the next one. Or if it's an email that's way too long, like there's been times like because we're with Bridger and we have our own company now. I don't know what's going on with lead gen. I can't blame them because we do the same, but I'm getting hit all over the place with lead gen people. From I got hit with one for security cameras yesterday that they want to send us a free trial, and I'm looking at these emails, and I might sound like a douche by saying this, but I literally reply and I was like, hey, go. I literally send a link to like Lavender free trial, and I was like, do better emails, and then I give them that link and send that over to them, because your messaging has to be clear and concise. Our podcast here is, we're not trying to give everything. Today's episode is we're talking about chapter 2. If you want to talk about chapter 1, go to last week. Or if you want to talk about chapter 5, if you've read this book, wait a couple of weeks, right? So it's just like it has to be clear and concise, and it has to hit that person, because now is the most valuable time to get people's time. It's really hard. It's really hard. And people like to complain like, oh, you're not doing anything anyways. Like people assume if you work from home that you have all the time in the world. I'm more busy than I was in an office, And so with that being said, understand that people need to be able to express themselves in a clear, concise way so that they can get their message across. We look at videos. I'm looking at content creation right now, and I'm like, one of my friends, she's blown up right now on TikTok. Like, brother, she's like literally like blowing up right now, getting brand deals, doing coaching, and she's just followed a simple 3 framework, which is, let me get a hook, let me tell a story, and let me have a call to action. And she follows it, and she's consistent every single day with it. But just coming back to here, like the cabbage thing was kind of funny about the 26,000 words, because, we overcomplicate or we try to compare, right? So it's just like sometimes I've received like really good emails. I'll copy it and paste it, and I'll look at it and I'll be like, okay, what did they do well here? What did I actually do that? And Dan, what about you in terms of now being more intentional with like your scrolling, with the way you consume content? Because now I've switched from consuming content to studying content. So that's one thing that I'm like, okay, what made me get here so well? Like you talked about the Lord's Prayer only being 56 words. You could have told me today that the Lord's Prayer is 200 words. I don't even know what the Lord's Prayer is myself, but that is such an amazing thing to say, because like you said, people live their lives based off of this, and it's only 56 words. Who can't learn 56 words? I don't know.
And Ryan, you hit, good Lord. I mean, we should have mic dropped and closed out on that. You hit one of the biggest points. I've been asking myself, where does all this come from? Where does the desire to use technobabble? Where does the desire to try and explain everything that we inside go, oh my God, somebody wants to hear this. They don't want to hear it. Where does that come from? I'm a grade 9 dropout, right? So I don't even have high school. And I was trained with filler words. I was trained that you have to write a 25-word essay. What if I can get all the points, hit that essay, and like knock it out of the park in 80 words? Why can't we? And I'm inside, I'm swirling right now, because you've just made like an aha, the sky's open, the sun shine down, and I'm like, you just really brought something to light for me. And I look at it and I say grade 9 education, and it's taken me this long now, I'm in my mid 40s, to try and eliminate those words. Like, talk about being ingrained and like just subconsciously being trained. It's blowing my mind right now, brother. Like, unbelievable. I'm actually lost. And you know what? I don't even know where to go from here. I mean, what you just said, if anyone's watching or listening, rewind to what Ryan just said. It's probably some of the most powerful information you will get to identify where this comes from, because you might not understand. And Ryan just gave you literally the golden key to understanding. Now that we know where it came from, we know how we can change it.
There we go.
And that, brother, thank you. I love you, man. That is unfriggin' real that you just did that.
Yeah, no, we look at our schools, and it's a system, like you said, even grade 9 dropout and things like that. We're
already programmed.
It's programmed.
That's programmed for life.
It's programmed for life because we've been doing it every single day, Monday through Friday, from 8 to 2 or whatever it is. That
Yeah.
whole time that we're there, we spent more time with our teachers than we did with our own families at that point. And there's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with that. I'm pro school, by the way. I want to make that known. But with that being said, I think there's a way to kind of, let's say, challenge it or kind of have like your own opinion. Like, I know when I was a kid, I couldn't go to social media and find my own opinion because it wasn't around. Our
Mm.
social media, Dan, was going to the library. And
Yeah.
what opinions are you really going to get from the library, right? Because I don't know, for me, when I was in high school, I wanted to read like cool books. I didn't read like self-help books and like business books and all that stuff. Maybe I should have. Maybe I'd be a billionaire right now, right? But from this and coming back to this book, because I've really liked this chapter, what he was talking about, their consistency in messaging. They was talking about like the advice of, you got to have consistency in everything you do because it reinforces the chosen position in your customer's mind over time. Right. So if you're consistent every single day, if you're prospecting every single day, your customer is going to see every Friday. Let's say they get a load dropped on them every Friday, and they still won't work with you. But if you show up every single Friday for them, they see that. You
Mhm.
consistently say that. If I was to, here's a converting email that I would probably send right now. Hey, did your carrier just cancel your load saying that their truck broke down? On a Friday, and you're scrambling. Take the scrambling out of what you're kind of doing right now. And I thought this was awesome because I'm really enjoying this advertising book. But I hate, and I want to take off labels too, because when I got this book, I thought it was an advertising book. This is really, I'm treating all books, including Power Now. This is just a life book.
Yeah.
This is just a reference book. This is just a manual, because there's so many cool things that are in here. You talk about what customer centric positioning. I think they get into the concept of positioning in chapter 2. Dan, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. So what chapter 2 is? So chapter 2 pretty much goes through. It's actually, the positioning starts in chapter 3 more
Okay.
than chapter 2. Chapter 2 is more setting up chapter 3. So, and the reason I say that is it talks about things like that New York Times newspaper, 500,000 words. How many thousands of words are in documents and legal documents, when literally some of the most powerful reading material is less than 300-400 words.
Mm.
um they talk about like George Bush, Ted Kennedy, and the voices that you talk about, like a grade 3 level. They go into that. They talk about, then they go into more of the media side of it, of the explosion. We have so much information coming at us
Yeah.
because this is the assault on our mind. And listen, one of the biggest things to take away from this book, and I guess in general, attention is everything.
Yes.
Time with people is everything. And this is what this is setting us up for. And then when we go into chapter 3, getting into the mind, that's where they take, here's what every mind is being bombarded with. Here's how you get in. So next week's going to be a great week, because we've gone through the product explosion, we've gone through the advertising explosion, and now we're getting into how do we get our way into the mind of our prospects, of the people we're trying to sell to, the people we're trying to communicate a message to. So that next week actually is, excuse me, Ryan, is where we dig into that. Now, I know originally we were going to go 2 and 3 today, but we only have time for 2.
Okay.
So any closing remarks that you can think of, Ryan? Because I'd love for you to drop a bomb here.
Oh, well, no, you're putting some high expectations, but I'm just thinking about how books are in general, and I want everybody to understand, whatever you're doing, sales, or you're doing anything, starting a business, or doing anything else, realize that the first 2 chapters, and realize what chapter you are in your business or your life. Look at those chapters, because the first 2 chapters of this book has really been setting the ground foundation. They
Yes.
didn't start this book with like, okay, let's get into positioning. The book is called Positioning, but it's hooking me, right? So we've read through 2 chapters already, and we haven't figured out what positioning actually is.
Mm-hmm.
So understand that when you're setting out your emails, you're doing your calls, do that, set the framework. Don't lead with chapter 3 right away. Lead with like chapter 1 or 2. Like, give them the
Yeah.
framework, let them feel what they feel, and then kind of go on through the process.